أول شيء أنا بس كون عم بقاتل، أكيد عم بقاتل عشان عقيدة معينة، هو الدين، هو أي شيء بيدفعني حتى أقدر أضحي بحالي.
What if I become religious? What if I believe? What if I practice religion? Everything seems to be better, easier. You feel like you're doing the right thing.
It's just obvious that we're right, they're wrong, and it's too bad that we have to kill people to prove that, but because God's on our side, it makes it okay.
As in the old days, soldiers and fighters sacrifice themselves on the battlefield and kill in the name of God. To understand the role that religion plays today in conflicts, why and how it is still used to send men in combat, we must go back 30 years, when religious concepts, considered obsolete, re-emerge in political speeches.
For those who've abandoned hope, we'll restore hope and we'll welcome them into a great national crusade to make America great again. I'll confess that I've been a little afraid to suggest what I'm going to suggest. I'm more afraid not to. Can we begin our crusade, joined together in a moment of silent prayer?
When in 1980, future President Ronald Reagan launches his Great Crusade, the world is still in the Cold War. A world split in two since the end of World War II and the construction of the Berlin Wall. On one side, the Western Bloc, united around the United States. On the other side, the Eastern Bloc, gathered around the Soviet Union. A bipolar world dominated by the clash of ideologies. In the East, the communists. In the West, the capitalists. But in the late 70s, religion reintegrates the heart of politics. Pope John Paul II, the first Polish pope in history, crosses the Iron Curtain and provides support to opponents of the Soviet regime. That same year, the USSR invades Afghanistan. Its powerful army clashes with the Mujahideens, resistance who fight in the name of Islam. In July 1980, Israel declares Jerusalem its eternal and undivided capital. The thrice holy city for Jews, Christians, and Muslims becomes the symbolic center of the wars that will inflame the Middle East. And in Iran, the Ayatollah Khomeini leads the first Islamic revolution in history. These major events mark the return of religion in politics. In 10 years, this resurgence will transform the geostrategic balance of the planet. The return of God in politics has found its battlefield. It is the Middle East, the large reserve of black gold of the planet, a highly strategic region on which depend the life standards of all people in the West. If the Eastern Bloc has provided oil from the resources of the Soviet Union, it is the Middle East who supplies the West. The major oil suppliers of the West are Saudi Arabia, the Arab Gulf countries, Iraq, and Iran, the economic and military ally of the United States. At its head, the Shah of Iran, a cold dictator, uncompromising and with little respect for human rights, supported by the United States since he seized power in 1953. Nicknamed the policeman of the Gulf, he has the most powerful army in the region.
Iran, because of the great leadership of the Shah, is an island of stability in one of the more troubled areas of the world.
We are in 1978. America still believes in the invincibility of its ally. But in 6 months, everything will change. The serious economic crisis in Iran causes strikes in oil refineries. Social injustices and the Shah's severe repression push the population to its limits. When the regime suppresses the protests in blood, the West turns a blind eye. The rise in power of unions close to the Communist Party raises the worst fears. But the bloody military repression fuels the insurgency and causes the first major protests. To everyone's surprise, the protesters do not march on behalf of the struggle of classes, but in the name of religion. Akbar Ganji is in the crowd. He is a student. The events will transform him into a fighter. He believes in the religious revival of his country and will become guardian of the revolution. 30 years later, he lives in exile in the United States and is an advocate for human rights.
من یک جوان 19 ساله انقلابی بودم با شروع حال یک انقلابی تمام عیار و بسیارم فعال بودم در اون انقلاب شرکت داشتم. دقیقاً مثل همه انقلاب‌های دیگه بود. یعنی این احساس در شما هستش که یک چیز سراسر نو رو میخواید درست کنید. به قول هانا آرنت، یک قصه‌ای که همه چیش نوعه، تمام الفاظش، کلماتش، محتواش نوعه. گویی از امروز تاریخ از امروز شروع میشه. در گذشته هیچی نبود. اون گذشته همه رو ویران میکنیم که امروز تاریخ از صفر شروع بکنیم. یک چیز سراسر نو میخوایم درست کنیم. به عنوان ایجنت وارد میشیم، یک تاریخ جدید میسازیم، جامعه جدید میسازیم، انسان جدید میسازیم و این حسه که میتونید سراسر عدالت درست کنید، سراسر آزادی، عشق.
God, or at least religion, has been misused and abused in the modern Middle East now for at least 30 years. I think you can date it to the Iranian Revolution and the return of Islam as a major force in the politics of the region. In the first two-thirds of the 20th century, Islam had receded as a political player and had been replaced by nationalism, especially Arab nationalism in the Arab world. 1979, 1980, that began to change. Disillusionment with Arab nationalism set in across the Middle East, and in its place came the forces of radical Islam.
That same year, 1979, political Islam appears also in the eastern regions of the Middle East, in Afghanistan. The Soviet Union invades the country in order to support the communists in power. It runs into the Afghan resistance, which here again will fight not in the name of ideologies, but in the name of Islam. To cope with the invasion, the West supports the resistance. Among its leader warriors, Massoud, who advocates a moderate political Islam, but also bin Laden, the future founder of Al-Qaeda. The struggle is a jihad, a holy war waged against the atheist Soviet invader, an invasion that the United Nations and the West condemn, but behind the scenes, the discourse is different.
There were many in the United States who welcomed the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan as a way to suck the Soviet Union into a Vietnam-like quagmire.
The US strategy is that of the Japanese game of Go. In order to weaken the Soviet Union, it isolates it by playing the card of religion. It helps the movements of the emerging political Islam in Afghanistan, but also in Pakistan and across the Middle East. A strategy that will prove its effectiveness, but also reveal dangerous side effects.
The West was able to capitalize on others' very hard fighting and very difficult situations in order to see what no one expected come about, the collapse of the Soviet Union.
In Iran, the West is also trying to exploit the religious revival. The providential man that the crowd demands, braving every day martial law, lives in exile in France, near Paris. Ayatollah Khomeini, the spiritual leader of the Shiite Muslims, the majority in Iran, holds press conferences. He prepares safely the Islamic Revolution and his return home after 15 years of exile.
استعفا که معنا ندارد شاه باید کنار برد برای اینکه او به واسطه رأی ملت شاه نیست تا استعفا بدهد او باید کنار برد و ما بعد از رفتن او جمهوری اسلامی متکی به آراء عمومی و قوانین اسلام برپا خواهیم کرد.
Broadcast in Iran from France, Khomeini's statements fuel the uprising. The situation becomes explosive. Weakened by illness, abandoned by his Western allies who no longer consider him able to restore order, the Shah decides to leave the country for an indefinite period. A final attempt to calm the situation. He leaves the power in the hands of a provisional government and army. The young Israeli general, Yitzhak Segev, then military attaché in Tehran, was responsible for negotiating arms trade contracts between Israel and Iran, who were allies at the time. Advisor of the staff, he participates in meetings of the Iranian generals who quietly prepare the return of Khomeini.
So we decided we will come to the airport, we will control the Boeing, and from the airport we will take him to Kish Island. We will separate Khomeini and his people, journalists to the other side. We will kill Khomeini and his people, ask the journalists to take pictures, and they will fly back to France. This is totally logic.
15 days after the departure of the Shah, accompanied by all his staff and by the international press, the Ayatollah Khomeini returns to Iran aboard a Boeing specially chartered by France. A return that the US administration also prepared by sending an envoy to Tehran. General Robert Heiser, deputy commander of the NATO forces. He is carrying a message from the President of the United States to the Iranian generals.
When Hauser came, all the generals wait to hear what he will tell. So he told them, President Carter sent me here to tell you that he wants to see democratic life in Iran. So this night, the commander-in-chief, Karabaghi, left and joined the revolution.
For the Iranian generals, the message is clear. America supports Khomeini. They change sides and give up the secret plan to assassinate Khomeini. It's not the army who await his descent from the aircraft on February the 1st, 1979, but millions of Iranians who carry him to triumph.
I think the success of Khomeini is only because the differences during this time between Europe and between America. I mean, also Europe country is not one bloc. France want to have any kind of agreement, to have agreement about Iranian oil. Italy negotiates separately, Germany negotiates separately. And everyone thought that he will be moderate enough because of the oil that they will come instead of America. So everyone gave him support.
In less than 3 months, Khomeini holds democratic elections. He is named supreme leader and acquires both religious and political legitimacy. The Islamic constitution is adopted. Article 5 states that God is its goal, the Apostle its model, the Quran its constitution.
Ce n'est pas un mouvement anti-moderne, c'est pas un mouvement de retour à l'archaïsme, c'est pas un mouvement de retour au Moyen-Âge, comme on peut le décrire parfois, c'est au contraire un accomplissement très moderne, c'est-à-dire que finalement, la vie politique prend tout l'espace, et elle prend même l'espace de la religion. On a affaire en fait à une divinisation du fait social. C'est pas la transcendance, la verticalité, c'est fini. Dieu s'inscrit même dans l'horizontalité des sociétés humaines et c'est lui dont on fait le principe de ces sociétés. C'est ça le fondamentalisme. Encore une fois, ce n'est pas un retour, c'est l'avènement d'un nouveau système.
The West thought it could make Khomeini its new ally, but hardly in power, the supreme leader turns its back to the West. He transforms his religious power into a political tool and denounces Western imperialism that he presents as the main enemy.
I think that most Western leaders, certainly most American leaders, found it very hard to comprehend that an Ayatollah, who was an obscure figure for most of them, an obscure post for most of them, after all, who knew what an Ayatollah was in 1979, could actually command the level of support that Khomeini commanded, and that he could actually run a country, which is what Khomeini proved he could do. He was completely underestimated.
On November the 4th, 1979, a group of 400 students attacks the United States Embassy in Tehran and takes 52 US citizens as hostages. In exchange for their release, they demand the return of the Shah to be put on trial in Iran. Jimmy Carter refuses. Khomeini calls America the Great Satan.
ببینید شیطان خودش یک موجودی هستش که از طریق متون مقدس دینی، تورات، انجیل، قرآن ما باهاش آشنا شدیم و این متون مذهبی خیلی خیلی نقش زیادی به شیطان تو این عالم میدن. حالا تمام اون نقش‌های اغواگری، فریبدهی، سیطره یافتن بر انسان برای کشوندنش به راه‌های باطل که این شیطان داشت، اینو آقای خمینی آوردش تو تاریخ، تبدیلش کردش، مجسم به ما نشون داد، گفت اینه، این دولت آمریکا هستش. کاری که آقای خمینی کرد، اون مفهوم سکولار رو تبدیلش کرد به یک مفهوم مذهبی با کردن شیطان بزرگ.
I mean, religion is a big capital in Iran. And even if you were in the shoes, in the place of the people who are ruling now, you would use this capital, because it's a very big capital, very important. For 1,400 years now, there has been such a capital left over in Iran, dormant.
The supreme leader draws on religious discourse in order to establish the popularity of his revolution. The Quran provides him with the necessary concepts and arguments to oppose the United States. As a career military in the Navy, Andrew Sapp is mobilized on the Seattle Naval Base during the hostage crisis.
As things got worse, as the hostages were seized in the American embassy and that, there was again this sense that this was like a personal attack on the United States. And so there was this kind of rush of fervor, we've got to show these people, they can't do this sort of thing, So there was really a sense in the military at that time that we need to go over and kick their ass, and put things back right.
The US military tries an operation to free the hostages. It is a fiasco. The commando's helicopters crash in the Iranian desert. 8 American soldiers are killed. Their bodies are left behind.
It was heartbreaking. These soldiers were killed in the process, soldiers and sailors that were involved in it, but also that, this was going to get our hostages out and they screwed it up, So it was really an emotional blow.
We now had a very different kind of radical Islamic leader who was determined not to lose control of the revolution. That's why he took control of the American embassy and held American hostages for 444 days to cement the power of the Islamic Revolution and the Islamic Republic.
And to show America that they cannot continue being the ruling
That's right.
power in the Middle East.
To show America that the era of CIA coups and intervention was over, and that Iran was now going to stand on its own 2 feet and could no longer be pushed around by the United States or Great Britain or any other of the foreign Western powers.
I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
Weakened by the hostage crisis, Jimmy Carter loses the elections. A few minutes after the accession to power of his Republican rival, the hostages are released after 440 days of detention. A deceitful victory, for the real winner is Khomeini. He demonstrates to the whole world that he is capable of standing up to America and even of influencing the choice of his president. A president who, in order to take power and seduce a humbled America, also campaigned using religion.
Reagan himself, of course, was not very religious. But his campaign managed to tap into this, on the one hand, desire to restore America's pride, but on the other hand, this conservative Christian element that felt that, the liberalism of the late 60s and 70s, had undermined our culture and had attacked good Christian values. And so this was a chance for them to have influence in the political sphere in ways that religion didn't really have before, at least, in the last century or so.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and Dr. Jerry Falwell.
This, Mr. President, is a convention of preachers, Bible-believing, Christ-loving, Christ-exalting preachers. And I might add, preachers who like the way you do things.
When Ronald Reagan arrives at the White House in 1981, it is with the support of fundamental evangelists. At their head, his friend Jerry Falwell, founder of the Moral Majority, an extremely conservative political religious movement, who will have great influence over his presidency.
For the eyes of all mankind are still upon us, pleading with us to keep our rendezvous with destiny, to give hope to all who yearn for freedom and cherish human dignity. We have God's promise that if we turn to Him and ask His help, we shall have it. With His help, we can still become that shining city upon a hill.
Inspired by the Bible, the formula, the city of light upon the hill, that he would repeat throughout his presidency, is taken from John Winthrop, a 17th century English Protestant evangelist. He is considered one of America's founding fathers. For him, the creation of the New World is the result of a covenant with God. The accession to power of the nationalist right influences not only the domestic politics of the United States, but also its foreign policy.
The idea persists that somehow or other we are the chosen people, the new chosen people, that we do indeed have a mission, whether it's assigned to us by God or by providence or by history, and by extension, because we have that mission, we believe that we should be able to exercise unique and special prerogatives to enable us to accomplish that mission.
The mission of American evangelists is to prepare the return of Christ on earth so that the new world begins. To achieve this, They are, as in the time of the Crusades, looking towards Jerusalem, the holy city of the three great religions of the book. Christian evangelists, as the religious Jews, believe that the biblical prophecy of the New World will only be achieved when Solomon's temple, the residence of God on earth, that was destroyed 2,000 years ago by the Romans, has been rebuilt. This should happen on the Temple Mount, situated above the Wailing Wall, considered one of its only remnants. This messianic belief will be used for political purposes both in Israel and the United States.
This has very important political implications, not least of which is that this large and politically powerful group of American Protestant evangelicals is absolutely committed to seeing this process occur, and that translates into adamant support for the state of Israel, and by extension, a lack of sympathy for the plight of the Palestinians or the desire of Palestinians to have their own state.
To understand the political implications of the exploitation of this belief, it should be known that after the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago, the Temple Mount became, in the 7th century, the esplanade of the mosques, the third holiest place in Islam, built on a stone twice sacred. If, for the Jews, this is the rock where Abraham almost sacrificed his son, for the Muslims, it is the place where the Prophet Muhammad lived his ascension.
Et chacun veut se l'approprier. Donc il y a un véritable problème. À la différence de tous, le peuple juif, nous croyons à la reconstruction du temple. Nous y prions depuis des milliers d'années. Mais nous n'assassinons pas des personnes pour pouvoir arriver à nos fins. Nous sommes persuadés que le jour viendra où cette reconnaissance, il y aura une véritable reconnaissance de notre droit sur ce lieu.
The rebuilding of the temple becomes a political issue after the Six-Day War. From the 5th to the 10th of June 1967, after months of border incidents, the Israeli army invades in 6 days its Arab neighbors, occupying the Sinai, the West Bank, Gaza, Golan, and East Jerusalem. If Sinai is quickly evacuated, the colonization policy of the West Bank begins, and East Jerusalem, the Arab part of town, is considered as permanently annexed. In 1967, Shlomo Sand was 21. An Israeli soldier, he participates in the Battle of Jerusalem.
Je me souviens que déjà, après 2 jours, comme je suis entré dans la vieille ville, et j'ai vu les gens, c'est-à-dire les indigènes, et tellement peur de moi, tellement effrayés, avec leurs petits drapeaux blancs comme ça, des chiffons blancs. Donc le sens de guerre de défense, j'ai perdu très vite. Tous les slogans, toutes les discussions autour étaient, voilà, on a libéré, on a attendu 2 millions pour libérer Jérusalem. Donc Dieu est avec nous et on a gagné.
300,000 Palestinians took to the road of exile to join the camps in neighboring Arab countries, mainly in Jordan and Lebanon. An exodus experienced as a humiliation in the Muslim world that will have serious consequences. The Palestinian resistance will emerge and organize in these camps.
La plupart des intellectuels israéliens à cette époque ont soutenu la conquête, l'occupation. Ils ont cru qu'on peut bâtir un grand Israël de la Jordanie jusqu'à la mer. La plupart des intellectuels gauche et droite mêlés.
The victory of the Six-Day War will be transformed into the victory of religious Zionism, a movement that will become increasingly influential. Unlike the secular Zionism, founder of Israel, religious Zionism wants to build the great Israel. From the Mediterranean to the Jordan, it would include all the Holy Lands, well beyond the boundaries defined by the United Nations. When the Israeli government develops in the conquered territories, the settlements, the militant religious nationalists create their own colonies. First considered illegal, these colonies will give rise to the movement of the settlers. For them, the right to this land is given to them by God, and there is no room for a Palestinian state.
C'est un combat qu'on mène avec le peuple juif, avec l'histoire juive de 4000 ans qui nous rappelle que cette terre nous appartient. Les chrétiens le savent très bien aussi. Chacun qui lit la Bible sait que cette terre nous appartient. Et oui, nous, religieux et non religieux, savons que cette terre nous a été donnée par Dieu, oui. De la même façon, comment est-ce que vous vous sentiriez si quelqu'un viendrait et vous dit « Vous n'avez pas le droit d'habiter, vous les Français, vous n'avez pas le droit d'habiter en France ». Et sachez que bientôt ça va venir. Si vous allez laisser les Arabes, les Islamiques continuer à leur djihad, parce qu'ils commencent le djihad ici, et ils veulent continuer en Europe. Un des slogans les plus intéressants qu'il y a dans l'autorité palestinienne, c'est « First the Saturday people, then the Sunday people ». D'abord les gens du Shabbat, du samedi, c'est nous les Juifs, et puis les gens du dimanche, on va s'en débarrasser, c'est vous les chrétiens. Il y a ici, la vraie guerre ici, c'est pas pour la Judée et la Samarie, ce que vous appelez les territoires occupés. La vraie guerre, c'est l'islam contre le monde judéo-chrétien, contre la civilisation occidentale.
اليهود يعتقدون أن الله سبحانه وتعالى أعطاهم فلسطين لتكون الأرض المقدسة، ولذلك فإن إسرائيل لا يمكن أن تمنح الفلسطينيين الحرية في بالقيام بدورهم في أرضهم.
When the Knesset unilaterally declares on July the 30th, 1980, Jerusalem as the eternal and undivided capital of Israel, the United Nations condemns the decision. America and Israel are silent. The Temple Mount for some, the esplanade of the mosques, for others, turns into a battlefield, where there will be fighting in the name of God for decades to come.
Jérusalem, c'est l'endroit par excellence d'une telle confrontation, puisque le rapport entre Dieu et la terre est un rapport essentiel, au point que Dieu apparaisse parfois un peu comme le directeur d'une agence immobilière, puisque qui a la terre a l'origine, et qui a l'origine a le pouvoir.
The political use of religion by and against the West will not only spread but become increasingly difficult to control. Ronald Reagan's America is facing a new challenge. Iran borders on the very strategic Strait of Hormuz. The rising power of the Islamic Republic represents a threat to the Western control of this narrow passage, 60 kilometers long, that connects the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Sea, a passage for 30% of the world trade in black gold. The supply of oil to the West is threatened, and the price of barrel escalates already. In order to try to weaken Khomeini and eventually get rid of the Islamic Revolution, the West will once more use religion.
L'idée, ça a été de, d'instrumentaliser tout de même cette vieille opposition entre monde arabe et monde persan, d'instrumentaliser cette vieille opposition entre sunnites et chiites, mais le résultat est catastrophique.
In the Muslim world, the conflict between Shiites and Sunnis goes back to the disputed succession of the Prophet Muhammad, a conflict that has caused wars for 13 centuries, and that America will now use and update. Today, the Shiites represent 15% of Muslims worldwide, but 90% of Iranians. The Sunnis, the majority in the Middle East, fear, as does America, the rise of Islamic Republic of Iran. Yet in Iraq, which borders Iran, a new president comes to power. Saddam Hussein. He is the architect of modern Iraq, an economic ally of the West. Facing a Shiite opposition in his own country, he also fears the rise of Khomeini.
Évidemment, on savait que Saddam Hussein n'était pas présentable, mais il était laïque, un militaire, socialiste. C'est pas, il semblait tellement mieux que cet imam Khomeini qui haranguait les foules au nom de Dieu. Et donc, vraisemblablement, contrairement à ce que pensent les Iraniens, l'Occident n'a pas organisé la guerre entre, ou n'a pas provoqué la guerre entre l'Irak et l'Iran. Mais dans un premier temps, évidemment, les Occidentaux ont soutenu Saddam.
وكانوا يقيمون هذا الاعتبار على أساس الهجوم لأنهم أكبر حجما.
On September the 22nd, 1980, Saddam Hussein's troops began to invade southern Iran. The war between Iran and Iraq has begun. This is the first Gulf War, and it will last 8 years.
It was an Iraqi decision to start this war. No one in the West, though, regretted it. Here was hopefully a chance to, if not overthrow the Khomeini regime, at least weaken it severely.
Claiming a border dispute dating back to the time of the Shah concerning 3 islands in the Strait of Hormuz, Saddam Hussein uses the silent complicity of the West to consolidate his occupation of southern Iran. The United Nations condemns Iraq, but does not require the withdrawal of its troops. Saddam Hussein continues his attacks with impunity. Although secular, he also begins to refer to religion. He names his offensives Qadisiyya, in reference to the conquest of Persia by Sunni Arabs in the 7th century. Decimated by its own revolution, the Iranian army cannot fight back. Khomeini mobilizes his civilian population.
به هر حال صدام حمله کرده بود، کشور ما رو مناطقی رو اشغال کرده بود و جوانهای مملکت رفتن جنگیدن، کشته شدن و اونهایی که میرفتن میجنگیدن خیلی شجاعت داشتن، رفتن این کاری کردن و اکثر اونها میگفتن ما به فرمان خدا میریم، برای خدا میریم و کاملا تفسیر مذهبی میشد. جهاد، شهادت، بهشت، همه اینا میومد.
اول فضل نوجوان علمدار لشکرم، اول فضل نوجوان علمدار لشکرم، مه هاشمی نسب امیر دلاورم.
The Iranians, in turn, use the holy wars of the past. They named their counteroffensive Kabbalah, in reference to the fights of the first Shiites against the Sunnis to liberate the tomb of their great prophet, Hussein, located in Iraq.
Le noyau identitaire le plus sûr, c'est le noyau religieux. Surtout si ce noyau religieux est réduit, finalement, à quelques principes simplissimes. Il y a une force de mobilisation qui est extraordinaire, puisque, effectivement, les messianismes séculiers, les matérialismes historiques ont eu des martyrs. Mais c'était des martyrs qui pensaient mourir pour la cause. Offrir le paradis comme terme du sacrifice, c'est quand même autrement plus fort. Voilà. Et donc, on a là une capacité politique du phénomène religieux qui est 1000 fois plus fort que finalement les constructions para-religieuses, toutes les théodicées un peu laïques qu'on a eues au XXe siècle, c'est sûr.
During the war years that followed, men, but also women, children, old people are sent to the front, convinced that their sacrifices open the gates of paradise and prepares the advent of the new world. Abdul Karim Soroush was then the director appointed by Khomeini at the Islamic Culture Group. He lives today in exile in the United States, where he is one of the most influential intellectuals of the opposition.
The Islamic Revolution was paving the way for the coming back of Mahdi and the coming back of Jesus. So this is really a Mielianist, rule, looking into the future and paving the way for the happiness of the people in future and so on. So all these ideas, were employed by the government in order to consolidate its position and in order to sell the idea of the Islamic Revolution, Islamic rulership to the people, and in order to tell them that they are on the side of history and history is on their side, some sort of a communist idea which is akin to religious thinking.
Like American evangelists and religious Israeli nationalists, the ideologues of the Iranian Revolution used the myth of the coming of the New World. And they too turned towards Jerusalem.
L'imam Khomeini, il ne veut pas simplement d'un Iran islamisé, il veut le leadership du mouvement islamique international. Or, il a un problème là, c'est qu'il est persan, c'est-à-dire non arabe, et qu'il est chiite, c'est-à-dire non sunnite, c'est-à-dire qu'il est 2 fois minoritaire.
By turning to Jerusalem, the third holiest place in Islam, the purpose of Khomeini is to consolidate his revolution by seducing all Muslims, Shiites, as Sunnis.
Their revolution is for the entire Islamic world. And to try to sell it to the entire Islamic world, they try to drape it in those Islamic issues that resonate most powerfully. And no issue resonates more powerfully in the world of Islam, from Morocco to Indonesia, than the quest for justice in Palestine.
It is the invasion of Lebanon by the Israeli army in 1982 which will give Khomeini the needed arguments to export his revolution. Lebanon, turning point of the Middle East, bordering the Arab countries, Jordan, Syria, and Israel. A country where meet Christian communities close to the West, Sunni Muslims supported by the Gulf Arab countries, and Shiites under Syrian and Iranian influence. A country where the Palestinians expelled from Israel took refuge. United around Yasser Arafat, they organized the fight for the creation of a Palestinian state. A tense situation that Israel sees as a threat. On June 6, 1982, the Israeli army bombs and invades Lebanon preventively, takes Beirut, its capital, and hunts down the Palestinian opposition. Three months after this invasion, from the 16th to the 18th of September 1982, in order to avenge the assassination of Lebanese President Bashir Gemayel, Christian militias are guilty of the terrible massacre of the Palestinian camps of Sabra and Shatila, located in a suburb of Beirut, when over 900 Palestinians are killed in 2 days, under the eyes of the Israeli occupying forces. At that time, Akel Hamia is one of the military commanders of Amal, Hope in Lebanese, the main Shiite revolutionary movement in Lebanon. For him, the culprit is Israel.
ضد الصهيونية المتمثلة بالكيان الغاصب المحتل لأرض فلسطين ودفاع عن أرضنا، بينما بالنسبة لإسرائيل اللي هي غدة سرطانية تستنزف العالم العربي والعالم الإسلامي بكل مقدراته، إنه لولا وجود إسرائيل لكان أموال النفط العربي يدفع للتنمية وليس إلى السلاح اللي تأكله الصحراء ولا يستعمل.
The Islamic Republic of Iran will immediately tap into this desire of revenge against Israel, which it describes as an oppressor serving US imperialism. Iran supports the armed wing of the Lebanese resistance. It is the birth of Hezbollah, the party of God. Hezbollah became one of the most active and powerful movements of Islamic fundamentalism. From its origins, it is a major source of terrorism in the world. Hostage-taking, suicide bombings, the victims are counted by hundreds. The enemy is personified by Ariel Sharon, the Israeli defense minister at the time of the massacre of Sabra and Shatila. A year later, an Israeli inquiry commission will recognize the personal responsibility of Ariel Sharon, and he will be forced to resign.
وكانت أول دولة إسلامية ثورية هي إيران. اعتبرناها الملجأ الوحيد لكل الشباب في العالم، لأن هي تنصر الضعفاء ضد الظالمين.
But in Iran, the war against Iraq drags on. The events in Lebanon give birth to a new slogan. The road to Jerusalem goes through Karbala. Karbala, the holy city of the Shiites located in Iraq, 100 kilometers from its capital, Baghdad. A slogan designed to galvanize the troops by making them dream about the liberation of Jerusalem. But on the battlefield, the war bogs down. The advance of the Iranians on the Iraqi land is repelled by Saddam Hussein's army, and vice versa. A dance of death that makes hundreds of thousands of victims.
Many in the West thought this was the best outcome. Keep this war going forever. Let the Iranians and Iraqis bleed each other.
The West provides weapons in turn to the Iraqis and the Iranians, despite the embargoes voted by the United Nations.
Spadolini used to be defense minister of Italy. So I told him, Minister Spadolini, I want to ask you, I came from Iran. What is your idea? What is the best way to stop this bloody war? Spadolini told me, I never forgot this in my life. This war is the best thing that happened to Europe. Because listen, young General Segev, in this war, they are now buying from us. Every year, more than $100 billion. You mean the both sides. And also they destroy each other. So it means during the war, it will be damage of 300 billion. And after that, to repair it, it's another 300 billion. All this will be for us.
In the United States, the scandal broke in 1986 under the name of Irangate, when the Congress discovers that Ronald Reagan's administration sends weapons and missiles illegally to Iran via its Israeli ally.
It's really quite cynical because this war, which I think most of us in the West are even today basically oblivious to, killed a couple million people. Again, our fingerprints are, America's fingerprints, are all over that.
After 8 years of a war that has nothing religious, both countries are on their knees. Baghdad and Tehran are in turn bombarded, and foreign trade ships are attacked in the Gulf. The oil supply of the West is threatened, and the US military is ready to intervene. It will require that Iran denounces the use by Saddam Hussein of chemical weapons provided by the West to impose the end of the hostilities. On the 18th of July 1988, Tehran finally accepts the ceasefire proposed by the United Nations.
Wars never go exactly the way you hope they will. That's one of the outcomes of conflict, is unexpected outcomes. In the end, Khomeini famously sipped a chalice worse than poison and agreed to a ceasefire. And now we had a triumphant Iraq, burdened with enormous debt, having suffered thousands of casualties, now looking for some way to pay off that debt.
The war between Iran and Iraq, the first Gulf War, ends. No winner or loser. The two countries regain their pre-war borders, but both are now seeking compensation. In Iraq, Saddam Hussein will soon trigger the Second Gulf War.
ما اولا تشکر میکنیم از هیئت دولت و ملت ایران.
And in Iran, the Ayatollah Khomeini dies but leaves behind an Islamic regime firmly established and eager more than ever to become the new great power in the Middle East. Ten years after the launch of Ronald Reagan's Great Crusade, on October the 9th, 1989, the Soviet bloc collapses. The US strategy of suffocation of the USSR was successful. The Cold War ends and the world begins to dream of peace and unity. But the end of the Soviet Union does not end the wars that are ravaging in the Middle East. They will increase in intensity and embark the world in a new round of violence. The actors of the 80s and of the coming decades are in place. Fighters, soldiers, and politicians. They are ready to battle no longer in the name of ideologies, but in the name of God.